So we're getting ready for our next speaker. We have Michael Winnick from dScout going to be talking to us about a qualitative platform. And Michael.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Do you need anything?
I just need the clicker. So, okay, how you guys doing? You doing all right? Okay, so I'm Michael Winnick. I'm the CEO of dScout. As mentioned, it's a mobile qualitative platform. My background really is as an innovation consultant. I'm also a partner in a company called Gravity Tank, and as a product developer. So I've had the chance. I'm not a researcher really. I've had the chance to do research and drive research and conceptualization around some of the most successful products on the planet. But I'm not by trade really a researcher. I'm more of I would call myself a product guy. So I'm not going to be talking about norms or standards or really that much research technology. So if that kind of leaves you a little bit sad, I won't be offended if you want to go somewhere else. But I'm going to spend actually most of the time talking really about design. And just a tiny bit about dScout here. We often trade. I'm also not a copywriter, so I'm saying a lot of what I'm not here. These are various taglines that we've developed and not used. My last one is the personal favorite and title of this talk. But do you guys see anything in common across these? You're researchers. You're good at identifying patterns, right? The word real seems to come up a lot. And we're a little obsessed with reality. And we're not talking about virtual reality or augmented reality. We're just kind of interested in reality, okay? So, and that kind of comes out of the fact that our background is really more from the design research part of the world. And I won't bore you with the details of walking through this slide, but there's kind of two things that I thought would be worth emphasizing about design research. First of all, design research is research you do when you're trying to design things. So it's research that's much more practitioner-enabled around people that are trying to make new stuff. That's kind of my background, my point of interest. And the obsession of design research is getting contextual, right? Getting to places where people are really doing stuff and seeing what's really going on in those places. And those places, in and of themselves, become stimuli, as we like to call it in research, for the research themselves as well as for the researcher. So this is kind of the background of design research, right? So we like to go out and kind of observe the monkeys in the tree. I like the little guy eating the little stick over there, right? So that's kind of where we come from. Now, there are some obvious challenges with this model that I'm sure many of you have experienced as you've tried to scale things like ethnography, right? Which is that researcher, they're usually pretty specialized. And it's only so many trees you can get to. And it's expensive to get to those trees, and it's slow. It takes a lot of time, right? We all kind of understand this. And part of the result of that is that the design research field has stayed quite small. And a little chihuahua is not really an accurate representation. I'd say we're more like a small, overweight bulldog or something. We don't move that fast, right? But in comparison to the world of market research, it's still a very specialized practice. Now, I don't know if you guys know about these things called smartphones, right? So, of course, a few years ago, we and many other people, who many of them are sitting in this room, said, oh, yeah, these things, they could help do this stuff, right? Smartphones will solve all of these issues. They'll let us scale this stuff, and they're going to bring the monkeys will document themselves. Perfect. Wrong. Okay. So what we've learned is that part of the challenge of doing this type of research is that it's very unique. And I won't generally, because it's both participant-led and it's very dynamic. It's not super structured. And that is a very fun, in quotes, and interesting problem. It's not really about just the application of technology. Technology is important to it, and I can talk about technology all day long. But really, it's about the application of design. And as we've gotten into working on dScout and we've had a chance to do a lot of research on dScout with great customers, we've realized that this is one big-ass, wicked design problem. It's a very interesting and challenging design problem because you really need to rethink pretty much everything about the way that you approach doing research. So let's just start with nomenclature. Who wants to be a panelist in this room? Right? Who wants to be a subject or a participant or an informant, which is also a term that people use, right? An informant maybe is kind of cool in a weird way. Okay, but generally, the nomenclature we use to even describe what we want to do with people is somewhat just disengaging right off the bat, right? And so we've tried to change the way we talk to people, right? And to try to engage them in something that is just all of a sudden aspirational right out of the gate. So on dScout, the people that do research are called scouts. Generally, they're documenting their own experience. They go on missions, which are basically discrete research activities. And in the course of those missions, they bring back little pieces of data. So we don't have a very sequential method. They bring back pieces of data called snippets, which are a combination of images and open-ended text and closed-ended questions. And I'll talk about why that's meaningful later. But we started with trying to change nomenclature. We also spend a lot of time on interface design and interaction design. So we are app-based in terms of the Scout experience. In terms of the researcher experience, most of our researchers do their work on the web, where we have a lot of tools for visualization. And we also really focus on the idea that a simple experience and a well-designed experience drives both Scout engagement, but it also drives the engagement of researchers. Right? So there are a lot of very sophisticated research tools that are kind of like flying an old 747 in terms of all the things you can do. We are not that. We kind of think that simplicity and constraint is actually one of the best tools you can use when you think about designing tools that actually work for your organizations, for your clients, and also for participants. Designing incentives and rewards. Often, and a lot of people I know have already talked about gamification and different incentive structures. We do a lot of work to basically shape and drive the ways missions are structured to ensure that people stay participating and are rewarded for good participation throughout. We do pay them, and we are very much exploring other incentive ideas and techniques. And if anyone is an expert in incentives, I would like to talk to you, because I think this is a very interesting field. Okay, but we do spend a lot of time working on this, and we have some additional things that are in the hopper here. We'll also talk about analysis. So I mentioned before, this is just a very subset of the sort of data that comes in on one of our typical missions. A mission usually on dScout is anywhere between, on the low end, 30 participants, on the high end, 200. And they usually submit anywhere between 5 to 10 entries each, so we can get a fairly decent-sized qualitative data set of these little chunks. These are what like a little thumbnail of a snippet looks like. And one of the things why we designed it around this whole idea of snippets is that since our data comes back in chunks, it's inherently analyzable. It's not a large transcript that you then have to put into chunks to analyze. It's all chunked for you. And so it naturally leads to ways to analyze that data. And we even have tools to visualize that analysis using a combination of some of the closed-ended techniques and keywords that we have. So we can pretty easily start pinpointing the sorts of things that matter. And there's also, as mentioned and discussed, I think another keen interest we have, and a lot of development will be done in terms of driving how to do analysis. But it's a big area of design. The other, and I'll spend the last 5 minutes talking about this, in addition to just the tools and interfaces and system pieces, I think one of the most important things, and one of the areas that we spend a lot of time trying to think about is how to get researchers to understand how to do good research this way. And there's really an art to it, an art to designing the research. No matter how great our tools are, right, there's some things that you have to learn. And so we thought we would share a couple of these. These illustrations are actually from snippets that have been submitted on dScout. And the first one here kind of talks about the idea of an engaging ask. If you ask people to do boring research, you will get boring data back. Generally true. If you ask people to do engaging research, like show me how you can make your tablet interface better, you might be interested in pain points and things that are a little bit more negative. Suddenly you get amazing stuff back. And so thinking really carefully about, is this ask going to engage people? Are they going to be leaning forward when they do it? Or are they going to be leaning back and saying, oh my God, I have to do this research thing? Or are they going to be like, oh, cool, that's kind of exciting. I want to do that. The right aperture. This is a study that was done actually to figure out some interface work for a product around wellness. But the focus of it had nothing to do with technology. We could have done the entire study on show me what you're doing on your phone to track wellness. But the aperture for this was show me when wellness shows up in your life, good or bad, and document those moments. So we got this great snippet of someone saying, I'm at the office, and I've been good all day, but now the little mini donuts show up, right? So by raising the aperture, what we're able to do is kind of see wellness in context and then make decisions about how we want to go design and develop the app by zooming the aperture out. Sometimes you can go in really narrow, but often I find that researchers want to go too narrow, and it's usually better, especially in earlier missions, to open the lens a little bit. The other thing you need to think a lot about, because the research is self-directed, is a trigger. A clear trigger, something people can remember. The trigger in this mission was when you write. When you actually take notes with paper. You guys familiar with paper? Right? Okay, so when you write on paper, we want to see it. Right? And so thinking really clearly that there's something, because people have to remember these things usually over a few days, right? What's the trigger that's going to get them to say, I want to go share? The last thing I'll kind of talk about, and these have been really great missions for us, are around prompted challenges, which is kind of an odd form of research, but it's actually, I kind of think about it almost as usability for the rest of the world. So as opposed to saying, we just want to document your behavior, you say, we want you to go get this thing, or we want you to go find this thing, and we want you to go use it or do this with it. This is a very interesting set of missions. It's around beer growlers, okay? And a growler is an oversized beer container that you can generally get at a brewery. And so this was a challenge around having people get growlers and go and try to go fill them, and watching the process of how they struggled with refilling their growler. Right, but also makes really interesting research because you can really track, almost like usability, where people succeed and fail, what issues they run into, and be very linear in terms of the learnings you get out the other end. So that's kind of it on the dScout front. I know we gave you no demo. Lenny said demos are not allowed, or any sales pitches. But if you guys sign up for dScout today, a free set of Ginsu knives for all of you. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. And I think it's just a good example. It just goes to show, actually, of the new opportunities and the new challenges that we face in market research. And I know that this is an area which has been a focus to ourselves as well. And having the usability, the design, they're all aspects in which we didn't have such emphasis on in our industry until now. Do we have any questions from the audience for Michael? A question from Lenny.
Lenny asks hard questions. Okay.
Thanks, Michael. Great presentation.
Sure.
What are the influences from a design standpoint when you were looking at actually developing the app and the applications for research? Were there things you looked at and thought, you know, that's really cool, we need to incorporate that in, we could do it better?
Sure. I think, I mean, obviously there's so much great design out there now. And I think that especially for participants, understanding what their mental models are. So from a Scout standpoint, it's going to be more like Facebook or Twitter right? And understanding that. I don't think that those are necessarily amazingly designed products, but that's kind of where their orientation is. So, but there are other things like, I'm sure you guys have seen Path and Instagram and products like that. I think we try to look really closely at those both as an interaction idea, but also a real emphasis on simplicity and speed in terms of the data we get back. I think another challenge on the design front I will add, and if people have examples of this, is I think the tools for really meaningfully visualizing large amounts of information on the back end are really in their infancy. There are a few examples that I've seen where I say that's really helpful to help a researcher kind of as an analyst, and so it's kind of finding places for that. So we've done a lot of work to try to push that forward, but I think there's a long, long way to go.
Very good. Has anybody else got any questions at all for Michael? Okay.
Hi, my name is Jane Dow with Firefly, and I'm a huge fan of Gravity Tank. So I'm so pleased to see you. Innovation inside research sort of seems like a strange combination, like they don't fit. And design, applying design to that as well. Where do you seek inspiration in your research? Because the part of my role is to bring some of this back to my team of moderators who are need some of that. Where do you go?
Sorry, what was your first? Did you say innovation and research kind of don't?
They kind of don't fit. Like you get kind of stuck in a rut. You know, you guys are like, this is the way we do things, and this is how it's always done, and clients won't let us do it different, and that sort of thing. So,
sure.
I'm looking for ways that we can inspire people to think differently about the way they do research, and would love to hear where you look or where you find that.
I think a bunch of different things. I think one of the benefits of operating in an innovation consulting environment is primarily companies are coming and asking you to invent something or to help them understand and create opportunities. You have a little bit more license in terms of the sorts of research you want to go do to make that happen. But I think that the heart of that is being experimental and being willing to try new things. Our work with dScout came out of experiments that we pushed and tried, and so I think it's being experimental, and often that means just having a willingness to kind of keep pushing the envelope and the sorts of things you try, and having a particular focus on being really focused on what you're going to try to learn, and designing the tools to go learn that particular thing. We can talk more about it, but yeah.
I think I would completely echo that, and it is all about experimentation and just being prepared to give it a go. And I know in this time, at the moment, everybody's budgets are tight, but if anything, now's the time to be looking to increase your research budgets and research and development budgets, and to be able to trial these things. Right. Is there any more questions for Michael? No. In that case, well, thank you very much, Michael.